the Small Business Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It truly does help the show, no matter what platform you choose, be it YouTube, Roku, Amazon Plus, or any podcast platform out there. I'm super excited to welcome today's guest, a two-time international best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, and strategic advisor, Andy Buyting. Andy, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. I'm excited.
I'm excited to dive into your entrepreneurial journey. But before we do, I want to rewind the clock just a bit. I want to go back to the days of when an aunt or an uncle or even a mentor at school would have asked you what it is you wanted to be when you grow up. Andy, what was your answer to that question back then?
At a young age, I would say my answer would have been I wanted to be a farmer. I grew up on a farm. My dad had a farm, always worked for himself. And I didn't realize, I never thought of the word entrepreneurship. To me, it was going to be a farmer. And that's where it started. So, yeah.
Do you mind if I ask, where was the farm and what kind of animals or what did you have on the farm?
We were actually vegetable farmers, and we had hundreds of acres of carrots. Ooh. And lots of carrots. So we ate lots of carrots growing up, and we had carrots. And then my dad and my uncle, their two brothers were in business together, and they also had greenhouses and grew bedding plants and flowers and so on. So they got heavily into the greenhouse business. So that's how I grew up. Yeah.
I love that you were surrounded by it. From all angles, you were surrounded by entrepreneurship and didn't even realize what it was. Isn't it funny how that happens as kids? You're saying to yourself, I'd love to do that, but the word entrepreneurship, the concept of it doesn't actually hit you until much, much later in life. So I love that, carrot farming. So what happened when you got to high school and college? What was it that made you say, okay, maybe a farm isn't where I want to be? What was it that kind of changed the journey for you?
Yeah, so it actually wasn't a conscious decision on my part, Lori. It was actually, we grew up on the farm, and then in 1986, we had a large fire claimed our carrot processing plant and cold storage plant. The whole thing burned down. And I remember I was about 10 or 12 at the time. Oh, it would have been 12 at the time. And so that changed the trajectory. So what we ended up doing, that's when the farming stopped, but we continued in the greenhouse business, and we actually opened up a retail garden center in the city, and because we lived out in the country, but the closest city, and we opened up a retail garden center, and my dad with my mom started that retail garden center business. And I, at the age of 14, when that was finally opened, I'd work there, on evenings, weekends, all the time, and work there. It started up a couple other businesses, but I basically never worked for anyone else. I went from there to university, and then I took over the family business. So it was not a conscious decision for me to leave farming. It was a fire that caused the whole family to leave farming and focus on the greenhouse business.
And truly, you not only were surrounded by entrepreneurship from an early age, but you had the opportunity to witness a major pivot in that journey prior to the journey becoming something you took on for yourself. And that's almost priceless information for a child to be able to witness and be a part of in any way, shape, or form. And I'm positive that sets you up really well for the future of, thinking about taking on the family business and moving forward with this. So it was no longer farming. You had already had the pivot. You're going into the greenhouse. You took over the family business. Tell me how it is that you took the family business and greenhouse and decided to shift into entrepreneurship as it is for you today.
Sure. Yeah, it was interesting because I've never worked for anyone else except for my dad, the family business. But it never felt like I was working for someone. So we, in both sides of my family, my mother and my father's side, they're all entrepreneurs. I still remember to this day, which I think you'd find interesting. The moment that a friend of mine, I realized that a friend of mine's dad worked for somebody. That concept, I didn't even realize was a concept. And I thought, that's interesting. That's so fascinating. Like, your dad doesn't have his own business or his own farm or his own store, because all of our extended family are all entrepreneurs. And so it was kind of interesting. So it was never a question that I would always work for myself. It was a question of what it would be and how it would look. The best opportunity at the time was the family business. And out of university, my father was adamant that he was not going to even talk about, shifting control of the family business to me until I had a university degree. So I got my business degree, and then immediately went into work with him. And 2 years later, took over the family business in a deal with my mom and my parents, my mom and dad at the time, and then continued to grow that. And then I've been involved in, God, I haven't even counted them up, but probably a dozen different businesses over the years. Bought and sold different businesses, started, grew. I lost different businesses. We either shut down or a couple of big bankruptcies in there. And I think, to your point, I never thought of that, actually, Lori, until you just mentioned that, is that witnessing my parents do a major pivot in their career when I was still a young teenager, probably influenced me to think that no business is ever like life doesn't start and end with the business.
Right.
In business, you're always reinventing yourself. And the business I'm in today may not be the business that I'm in 10 years from now. And that's okay.
Right.
And that's natural and normal. And you keep evolving. So I never thought about that. But yeah, that's the first big pivot we took as a family. And that probably had an impression on me.
I can only imagine what kind of an impression it had. I have to admit, Andy, I think you were the very first guest that I've ever had that has had the blessing of growing up with entrepreneurship as the lay of the land around you, to the degree where it was almost a shock for you to hear that someone had a parent who worked for someone else. Whereas 90% of the guests that I've had on this show, from the time that I started it as a podcast to, today where we're on TV, I mean, there are so many guests that I've had, and all of us have grown up with the thought of, you go to school, you get a job, you work for someone else. So the blessing of being surrounded by entrepreneurship, obviously, of course, would, blossom that journey for you. And then, like you said, the ability to witness that major pivot, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't get to see, even when they're in their own business. They don't get to see someone else go through that in such an intimate manner, as I'm positive you had the ability to do with your parents. You've had all of these experiences, which definitely, obviously, have shaped where you are today. So please share all about your practice today.
Sure. So, I'd be remiss if I did a couple of pivots, but the biggest pivot I did in my life happened about 12 years ago, actually. Prior to that, it was a number, after leading in the recession of 08 and 09, a long story short, we grew the family business. We grew it over 600% in a period of about 10 years. So we grew it quite quickly, but then I actually hit a brick wall, and, don't mind talking about it at all these days, but I actually went through bankruptcy and lost everything personally and in the business. Like, we lost everything. The only reason we kept the house is because I had it in my wife's name and not mine, because I lost everything. And at that time, and it was interesting because only 2 times did my wife ever bring up the idea of getting a job. But most people around me assumed, even my own mother said that, you should just look at getting a job with the government or with the bank or whatever. And my dad, myself, it was never a question. My dad, I remember saying, that's not who he is. Don't ask him to be not who he is. And, it was never a question. I was just going to figure it out. And I always tell young entrepreneurs now, no matter how bad it is, if you're an entrepreneur, by definition, it means you're going to figure it out. You just put one foot in front of the next, and you will figure it out. And for me, what that meant was afterwards, I started casting all kinds of lines, just trying all kinds of things. I probably looked at, I remember one time I counted 18 different businesses to get into and tried all kinds of things. And actually 3 of them stuck. And 3 of them I continue to this day. I started a
Nice.
marketing company with a really different business model, and that's now Tulip Media. That stuck and has grown and flourished over the last number of years. I got some investors together and did some real estate development. And now I
Nice.
do I own apartment buildings. So I've got a real estate development there. And I got into sharing my knowledge and my experience along with business methodology. And I became a business coach. I'm a certified scaling up business coach with Vern Harnish. And to this day, and over time, you figure out what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And to this day, I have all 3 of those businesses going. Plus, I'm invested in 3 other businesses as a minority passive investor. So, I've now learned as an entrepreneur, I had all my eggs in one basket, lost the basket. Now
Yeah.
I have my eggs in several baskets, and I'm really, really loving the entrepreneur environment, or the business landscape that I'm operating in right now. And yeah, and it's it's a great challenge every day, and really enjoying it, and really enjoying helping others find their own entrepreneurial journey and scaling their own companies and growing and so on. So that's been my that's been kind of where I'm at now, and specifically my journey over the last 12 years as well.
I thank you so much for bringing that piece in, because one of the pieces that I don't think we've covered on this show is the fact that bankruptcy isn't the end
No,
of the business. It doesn't have to be the end of the journey, even.
no.
You may be encouraged to end the journey. Because there's always going to be someone around you who wants for you to think twice. And sometimes it's for your own good, but it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
the end of the business. So I love that you brought that up, that, you've gone there, been there, and it doesn't matter who's around you that's saying that you should probably end the journey. You can still bounce back from that, because like you said, definition of an entrepreneur is we're going to figure it out. It's kind of why we went into it.
Yeah, I have to share with you what the day, Lori, the day I lost my business, the day, like the banks literally walked in the front door. Actually, they gave me a half an hour notice. They said, we're walking in at 8:30. If you want to tell your staff right now that as of 8:30 this morning, there's no more business. That was a hard day, but they literally walked in. And that day I called out to a mentor of mine that I had known for years and years and years, very extremely successful businessman. When he sold his company, they had 5 corporate jets, just to give you an idea of the success that he had. So I got together with him and I said, Bob, I've been in touch with him quite a bit through the journey. And I said, I lost everything. The banks walked in this morning. And he said, come over to the house. I'll be expecting you. So I went over to his house. And here's what he said. He said, how old are you right now? And at the time I was 36. He said, oh, that's the perfect age for your bankruptcy. He said, I lost everything at 42 and I thought that was a little bit too late. I'm glad you're doing it at 36. And he said, you know what? The way I see is that you were a really good business person in a really bad industry, in an industry that is declining. So why don't you be a really good entrepreneur, a really good business person in an industry that's rising? And that really struck me when he said, oh, that's the perfect age for your bankruptcy. Good. Get that one out of the way. Now you can truly build success. And I thought that is really a great way to look at this.
I
And
love
he
when
also
people
said,
have a silver lining.
yeah. And he said, you've just gone through the best, but the most expensive business PhD program you could ever attend. So that's great, Bob. But I was good with my education, the way where it was at. I wasn't looking for more, but it was, it's a great way to look at it.
Not only is it a great way to look at it, but gained all this knowledge about how that can come about, how to navigate those moments, and how to work with your employees, how to have those conversations. There's so much knowledge that you gain through going through that moment that I'm sure you now have the ability to kind of take with you and transform into where you are today. So I'd love for you to share all about Tulip Media.
Yeah. So Tulip Media has been a really fun adventure. We started with a very unique model where we would do custom publishing, and we would help clients, we call them client partners, create custom publications, whether it be newsletters, or printed magazines,
Mhm.
so that they could help brand themselves. And that evolved into a whole digital offering where our specialty and our niche is when we work with, typically it's a B2B client partner that has selling a larger ticket items, where it's an online to offline sales process. So we work with a lot of insurance agencies, we work with a
Mhm.
lot of manufacturers, with a lot of specialty service companies, and we'll help them. And where kind of our superpower is at is we help them properly set up and manage and execute on real strong online promotional campaigns, meaning pay per click. We'll set up their pay per click, SEO to bring traffic to the website. Most importantly, we take a scientific approach to building out their website so that the right clients will take a call to action. And then
Mhm.
we help them to engage with their clients through some sort of print marketing as well. But it's a whole package. Our measurement of excellence is not how much website we get to your traffic, how many people like your Facebook page or follow you on Instagram or LinkedIn. What we care about is how many times do we make your phone ring? How many times do we
Mhm.
have people who will fill out a contact form looking for more information? Or how many times do people book a meeting with you through your website, where you can wake up and instead of having to cold call and knock on doors, so to speak, you wake up and you see, oh, somebody booked a meeting on my calendar at 10 o'clock this morning. And I have another one at 1:30 this afternoon for people who are interested in what we have to offer. That's what we're good at. And the way we put it is we will make a marketing manager look like a superhero, because we'll help he or she deliver truly real, tangible results, measurable results for their company. So we work in the background, setting up and managing the whole process to make that marketing manager look like a superhero. So that's what we
I
do.
love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. You guys are marketing in a manner that is revolving around the income generating activities that are truly going to make a change in someone's practice versus measuring the engagement on social media. So,
Yep.
love that, measuring and managing the income generating activities. Tulip Media, I suggest that people go ahead and reach out to you. Please share some of the links in which they can go ahead and reach out to you.
One thing that we offer up to any of your listeners, Lori, is that if people go to tm.media /
Mhm.
double sales, I'll mention the book here in a moment, but tm.media / double sales, right there, listeners can download a free chapter of our latest book. A couple of years ago, Jessica Embry, my co-author, and I wrote the book Double Sales, Zero Salespeople. And it talks about our journey as well as the journey of many of our client partners that leverage online promotional tactics to basically reduce their sales force and produce more results. But yeah, if you go to tm.media / double sales, you can download a chapter of the book. They can buy the book. Or one thing that we encourage your listeners to do is look, if you're not sure what to do with your own marketing, with your own promotions online, at that URL, at that link, they can book a 30-minute call with myself or Jessica. There's no cost, and let's just chat about your business and your strategies. I guarantee it's worth the 30 minutes just to get some outside ideas, if nothing else, on a different way that they can
Mhm.
look at their own marketing and their own branding. So I encourage people
Excellent.
to reach out for sure.
Excellent. I'll be sure to include that link in the show notes page.
Yeah.
So definitely. So if you had the opportunity to go back, say 10 to 15 years and tell yourself just one thing, what do you think that would be?
10 or 15 years to tell myself one thing. I would say, I've learned a lot over the last 10, 15 years is for entrepreneurs to make sure that you're in a business, you have to be successful. You have to be in a business that you love, but it also has to be a business that makes sense. Meaning, I was in a business that I loved in the retail home and garden center business, but it was a declining industry with
Mhm.
the onsets of Walmart and Home Depot and Costco and all these guys that kind of, you know, made it very, very difficult to survive as an independent retailer. But I would say, do a business that you love, but get into a good business. If you have the choice between
Mm.
business A and business B, and business B is part of a rising tide, is part of a trend that's moving upwards, is part of an industry that has a really bright future. If you can be a good business person in a good industry, your success will grow exponentially versus being a really good business person in a tough industry.
Mhm.
You're swimming upstream all the time. So young entrepreneurs, I would suggest really looking at that. And you do have to enjoy it because if you're an entrepreneur, you may, you know, you're going to absolutely love maybe 3 or 4 days out of 10. Another 3 or 4 days are going to be mediocre. And then there's going to be 1 or 2 days that are just terrible. And if you don't love what you do, you're going to lose steam and you're going to lose interest and you're just going to lose motivation to keep pushing forward. So
Mhm.
we all have good days. We all have bad days. You're an entrepreneur. You'll figure it out in those bad days. Just keep putting one foot in front of the next. But make sure you're doing something that you love as well. It is really important.
Definitely. Andy, I think you've covered it all in this interview, from surrounding yourself with the right people, taking a measure and lay of the land to make sure you're in the right industry, and really going with something that's a rising tide, to making sure that you're really paying attention to yourself throughout the journey. I mean, I think you've really honestly covered it all in this episode. And I thank you so much for doing so.
Thank you for having me because it's always enjoyable to chat with such a pleasant person. And
Oh, you're
it's a
so
lot of
sweet.
fun.
I've enjoyed this conversation as well. I've really enjoyed hearing your journey, hearing the pitfalls, hearing the bounce backs, hearing how you've made sure to make some really strategic moves throughout your journey to make sure that your journey is something that you want for it to be. But patience and loving what you do are forefront in your mind on this journey, because without it, you're gonna lose that steam. It's really hard to maintain that motivation. So the show is really designed to help entrepreneurs come up with an idea for a business and an industry that they may not have been thinking of. So I'd love for you to share, Andy, if you had the chance to wave a magic wand and change anything at all in your business at the moment, what do you feel like that would be and why?
One magic wand that I am waving right now, if you want to call it that, Lori, is yeah, as an entrepreneur, you also need to realize what you're good at and what you're not good at. And it's taken
Yes.
me, I mean, I'm turning 50 this year, and it's taken me until this age to realize what I'm good at and not good at. It takes some time. And, I consider myself a fairly bright person. It's still taken me a long time, decades to figure out. But one of the things in my example, for instance, is I've come to realize I am really good. I'm a really good startup guy. I will get a concept off the ground
Mm.
running. I'm not a good operator. And the way one of my, I have a couple partners in Tulip Media, and and one of my partners said, he had a great analogy. He said, you're one of the best guys I know who can build the car, get it on the track and in the race. But once you're in the race and you're competing, if you don't get someone else in the driver's seat, you get bored and you'll take that car off road and see what it'll do off road. And
Hmm.
I'm notorious for doing that. And if you look at my business career, I do that all the time. But where I've been successful, it's been like real estate developments. I love putting big deals together, getting it through city planning, getting all the engineering done, getting the building built. And then once the building is built and it's filled up with tenants, I have buildings that I probably haven't walked through a half a dozen times afterwards because I'm
Right.
building managers who manage the buildings for me. And that's good. But I'm a good startup guy. I'm not a good operator. So with Tula Media as an example, I've recently hired a president who's going to take over as CEO. And I'm actually backing out of the company altogether. Because
Congrats.
yeah. So it's taken me, like I said, I'm not that bright because it's taken me so long to figure this out. So the person I brought on, somebody I've known for a long time, and he is an amazing operator, not a startup guy.
Nice.
He would never be a startup guy. It's too risky, just not interested in the heavy lift. But boy, can he take a car that's already in the race and fine tune it to speed it up. And he just started with us a couple of months ago, and already we're like, you could feel the accelerator pushing down on this, and we're on the track. We're not off track. We're not going off roading. So that's a big thing. But recognizing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and where your strengths do not lie, like where you have weaknesses, to recognize and to embrace it. Because I think that's something that I've known for a long time, but I always said, no, I'm a good operator. I'm a good operator, but I'm not. And once you embrace that and say, you know what, I'm going to have somebody else operate this company so I can get out of the day to day. I can focus on my coaching is great because I can work with different companies all the time and help them scale up and help them with their strategy and so on. And the real estate is great because you can build a building and then walk away from it, build the next building and walk away from it. But just embracing it and realizing that I'm just a really, really good startup guy. I'm better than most that I know, but I'm a really poor operator. So I've got to step out once it's up and running, and embracing what you're good at, and equally embracing what you're not good at. So
Embracing what you're good at. That is an outstanding one. Really embracing what you're good at and embracing what you're not good at enough so that you recognize it's time to delegate. It's time to make that move. Find the team, find the people who are going to help you actually flourish and grow from where you are. Entrepreneurs can only do so much on their own. We're all guilty of it. And it takes all of us time. Andy, you're not the only one. It took me until this year to hire my first admin. Okay. So no, you're not the only one, but it takes that time. It takes time for you to recognize, okay, this is where I need to take myself out of the picture. This is where I need to step back. And this is where someone else is going to be able to do a far better job than I ever could, because I have other things that I really should be focused on. Very excellent advice, Andy. I thank you so much for sharing your journey and your time with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me, Lori. It's always a pleasure. And with yourself, it's a special pleasure. So
thank you. I truly enjoyed the conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.